So in this series, we have the 1984 Chicago Cubs taking on the 1983 Chicago White Sox. I would say going into this series, I would definitely give the edge in terms of lineup to the Chicago Cubs. A lot of power in this lineup. Most of it is right-handed. I would say that the Chicago White Sox, they are one of those teams where you look at the cards and none of the cards really jump out at you as far as them really having great cards, but I would say it's a good lineup because no one is an automatic out. It's like all the cards are pretty good. I would say that starting pitching in this series is a push, although I would definitely give the nod to Rick Sutcliffe for having the best card between the two teams. So starting pitching, I would say, is a push. I would definitely give the edge in bullpen to the White Sox, even though I believe Lee Smith for the Chicago Cubs has the best bullpen card between these two teams. I definitely would say that the White Sox have more bullpen depth than the Cubs with Dennis Lamb and Solomon Barajas. So we will see that play out in this series. So in the first game, we have Rick Sutcliffe going up against Lamar Hoyt. Through a coin flip, the Chicago White Sox have home field advantage, so the first two games will be played in their park. And you can see in game number one, this game got out of hand pretty quick as the Cubs led 5-0 after 1.5 innings. And really from there, they were able to just cruise to an easy 13-0 victory. Ryan Sandberg had 4 hits and 2 runs scored in the game. Gary Matthews had 3 hits, including a home run, 3 RBI, 3 runs scored. And Rick Sutcliffe cruised. Took him out after only 6 innings because I figured he'll be coming back in game four on 3 days rest, so there's no reason to stretch him out. Took the same stance with Lamar Hoyt as they were down 6-0 in the top of the fourth. And after the leadoff man got on, I just decided to pull him. It's like, what's the point of leaving him in a 6-0 game just to rack up extra innings that he does not need? So Cubs with an easy game one win, 13-0, but don't let this particular game fool you. This was not indicative of what will go on in this series. So in game number two, we have Richard Dotson going for the White Sox and Dennis Eckersley going for the Chicago Cubs. And let's take a look at what happened in this game. And in 13 innings, the Chicago White Sox were able to take it 3-2. After being held scoreless for the first 15 innings of the series, the White Sox were able to finally dent the scoreboard as down 2-0 in the bottom of the seventh with 1 out. Kittle hits a 2-run home run to tie the game at 2. I would say the big performance in this game was definitely out of the White Sox bullpen. Now, what happened in this game was with one man out in the top of the sixth and the Cubs with a 2-0 lead, I decided that the White Sox had to do everything they could to just kind of keep the Cubs at bay and try to keep the score at just 2-0. So I brought the closer in Barajas to close out that sixth inning, and he ends up pitching 3 2/3 scoreless innings, and then Dennis Lamp followed it up with 3 scoreless innings out of the pen, and he would end up getting the win. As in the bottom half of the 13th inning, it was Tom Paciorek with a pinch hit RBI double to score Harold Baines, who led that inning off with a triple. And the White Sox were able to take game number two by a score of 3-2. So after the Cubs win the first game 13-0, the White Sox were able to scratch out a win in game number two, a win that they absolutely had to have going back to Wrigley for games 3, 4, and 5. Now, game number three was moving along like your average game. It was 2-2 going to the top half of the fifth inning. And what happened in that inning was Scott Fletcher led off with a double, and then Julio Cruz had a single. So, with first and third and nobody out, I decided to pinch hit Jerry Hairston for Floyd Bannister because my thinking there was The White Sox had been having trouble scoring runs in the series so far, and I really did not want to let this scoring opportunity go to waste. So I decided to pinch hit for Bannister with Jerry Hairston. He made out, and then Rudy Law struck out. And then really the turning point in the game was with two out and two on in that top half of the fifth inning. Larry Boa makes an error that allows Scott Fletcher to score. And with first and second and two men out in a 3-2 game, that's when the White Sox were really able to open it up. You had Harold Baines with an RBI single. Greg Lazinski hits a 3-run home run. Then a single by Kittle, and Vance Law follows that up with a 2-run home run. So after four and a half, the White Sox have a 9-2 lead. The Cubs were able to claw back into the game a little bit to make it 9-6 after six. But then the White Sox in the top of the seventh were able to put up another seven spot. So you could see a pretty crazy game there with the White Sox winning game number three by the final score of 21-11. You could see big day out of Ron Kittle, 4 for 6, home run, 3 RBI, 3 runs scored. Scott Fletcher had 4 hits, all of them doubles with 3 runs scored, and also Ryan Sandberg also had 4 hits and 4 doubles. So definitely a crazy game in game number three. The White Sox have a 2 games to 1 lead, and that sets up game number four, where we have a rematch of Rick Sutcliffe against Lamar Hoyt in really one of the best Strat-O-Matic games I ever played. This was just a great pitching matchup from start to finish. Rick Sutcliffe, 9 scoreless innings, 5 hits, 1 walk, 13 strikeouts. Lamar Hoyt matches those 9 innings, 9 scoreless innings, only 3 hits, 2 walks, and 4 strikeouts. It was the Chicago Cubs, though, who were able to scratch across the run in the bottom half of the 11th inning. Now, what happened in this inning was this was Solomon Baraja's second inning of work. And it wasn't in his point of weakness or anything like that because he was a 3 inning reliever. It had nothing to do with that. But what we had go on in this inning was Ryan Sandberg led off with a triple, and then Gary Matthews popped out. I intentionally walked Leon Durham. He walks, steals second base. Now, with second and third and one out, rather than walking Keith Marlin, because I really don't like walking the bases loaded in Strat-O-Matic because I really don't want the winning run to score on a walk, I decided to pitch to Keith Marlin. He makes an out without advancing any runners. Um, and then Thad Bosley pinch hit for Dave Owen, who had entered the game for Ron Say in the 10th inning. Thad Bosley walked, so that brought up Jody Davis with the bases loaded and two out, and Jody Davis is able to walk off with a single. So there we have it. After 4 games, the Chicago Cubs and the White Sox are tied 2 games apiece. Now, in game number five, we have a rematch of the game two starters with Richard Dotson going for the White Sox and Dennis Eckersley going for the Chicago Cubs, both pitchers going on 3 days rest. And this was a game where I was kind of kicking myself at one point during this game because with the score 3-1 in the bottom or going to the bottom half of the sixth inning. I had to bring a pitcher in for Richard Dotson because he had been pinch hit for by Greg Walker in the top of the sixth, and Greg Walker had actually had a RBI single to put the White Sox on the board finally to make the score 3-1. Now, what I did going into that inning was I brought in Britt Burns to try to squeeze a couple of innings out of him. And that move did not work out very well as Britt Burns promptly came in, gave up a single to Say, RBI triple to Larry Boa. Gary Woods came into the game to pinch hit for Eckersley. He had an RBI double and then a walk to Bob Dernier. So after that, I said enough was enough. Pulled Britt Burns out of the game, brought in Dennis Lamp. He was able to pitch 1 2/3 of scoreless innings. The White Sox were able to get a run on the board in the top half of the seventh inning with a home run by Ron Kittle. That made the score 5-2. So going to the top half of the eighth inning, the Chicago Cubs have a 5-2 lead on the White Sox. Now, Tim Stoddard had pitched the seventh inning. He allowed the home run to Ron Kittle. So I decided eighth inning, it's closer time. Let's bring Lee Smith in for the Chicago Cubs. And this is where the series took a turn. In the top half of the eighth inning, started innocently enough with Julio Cruz grounding out, and then I pinch hit Jerry Hairston for Dennis Lamp. He strikes out. And then that was followed by a single by Rudy Law, a single by Carlton Fisk. Harold Baines walks to load the bases, and with two out and the White Sox down 5-2, Greg Lazinski hits a two-out grand slam to give the White Sox a 6-5 lead. And yes, that home run was hit off of Lee Smith's card. So the Chicago White Sox are able to take a 6-5 lead into the bottom half of the eighth inning, and Solomon Barajas was able to come in and close the door with two shutout innings. The Cubs were able to load the bases in the bottom half of the eighth inning. I pinch hit Richie Hebner for Larry Boa. He had a one-out single. Then Thad Bosley pinch hit for Lee Smith. He had a single, and then with two outs, Ryan Sandberg walked to load the bases. But in what turned out to be the second biggest at bat in this game, Gary Matthews struck out. And then in the bottom of the ninth, you had a leadoff walk by Durham, but Keith Moreland followed that up with a double play, and Ron Say makes the last out. So after 5 games, the Chicago White Sox have a 3-2 series lead on the 1984 Chicago Cubs. So the White Sox were able to take 2 out of 3 in Wrigley. So in game number 6, we have Floyd Bannister going for the White Sox and Scott Sanderson going for the Cubs in a rematch of the game 3 starters. Again, this is game 6 with the White Sox going into the game up 3-2. And the Chicago Cubs were able to jump on Floyd Bannister, back-to-back solo home runs by Gary Matthews and Keith Moreland. So they were able to take a 2-0 lead. Scott Sanderson was perfect for the first 3 innings. And then in the fourth inning is where the White Sox were able to jump on him and take the lead that they would not relinquish. The big hit in that inning was Ron Kittle's 2 RBI single to give the White Sox a 3-2 lead. And then that is when I had pulled Scott Sanderson and brought in George Frazier. Vance Law was able to get a RBI ground out to make the game 4-2. And really from there, it was all the White Sox bullpen. You had Dennis Lamp throw 3 scoreless innings, and Solomon Barajas was able to pitch a perfect ninth inning. So there we have it. The 1983 Chicago White Sox defeat the 1984 Chicago Cubs 4-2. The big performances in this series, I would mainly call out 3 guys who had really the big series for the White Sox. Number one would be Dennis Lamp, who in 4 games pitched 8 2/3 innings, allowing 3 runs. And in those 4 games, he got 2 wins. Solomon Barajas in 8 1/3 innings only allowed 1 earned run with 2 saves. And don't forget the 3 2/3 scoreless innings he threw in game number 2, which was a game that the White Sox absolutely had to have. You see, between Lamp and Barajas, you have 17 innings pitched with only 4 earned runs. So that goes back to what I said at the start of the video with the White Sox definitely having the edge in bullpen depth. And let's not forget Greg Lazinski, 2 home runs and 7 RBIs in the series, and the big grand slam in game number 5, which, let's face it, that pretty much decided the series right then and there. So again, there it is. The Chicago White Sox, 1983, defeat the 1984 Chicago Cubs 4-2.